And if we evaluate why they're struggling as an organization, inevitably it comes down to an inability to adapt to change that's coming on the back of dramatic and transformative technological disruption.
This is the Brave Ideas Podcast, brought to you by Aqua, part of the Wonderman Network. Welcome to episode 31, the Brave Ideas Podcast, the show that is all about bringing to light fresh perspectives from the world of digital and marketing. I'm Dan Herman. I'm a digital strategist. I'm totally confused by Super Rugby, and I feel like a bar one most of the time. And today I'm here with my co-host.
I'm Esther. I lead the conversation analytics team here at Aqua, and I have not thought of the next line.
Today, we are really excited to have as our guest Mike Stopforth, CEO of Cerebra. Mike is a chronic Uberer who has played drums for the WPP Stream band 2 years running. In fact, he is the DNA of the band. And today, he's going to talk to us about why he hates digital. Mike, what's new?
I feel like you sold me out early, Dan. I feel like we discussed this topic and you sold me out right out there. Also, before we get into the topic, I just want to reach across and touch you. Can I do that? Because you said you feel like a bar one most of the time, but you don't. How disappointing. All right. So the topic that I wanted to put on the proverbial table today is all the reasons why I hate the term digital. I love things that are digital. I love the digital ecosystem and universe. And I'm being hypocritical right now because I'm using digital to describe things that I love, and at the same time I'm criticizing the term, right? So I'm gonna go back in time quickly. 3 years ago, I was on a panel discussion at one of these digital marketing conferences. I think it was at Jeremy Magg's Type 5, and they were having a debate around the pros and cons of mobile and digital advertising and communication. And it got quite heated. There were a lot of people on the panel, and there was a lot of passion and a lot of very opinionated and I think quite biased points coming across. and I sort of stopped it and I said, well, can anybody tell me what the difference is? Do we know what the difference is between mobile and digital? And that was when we were still talking about mobile. Seems like we've forgotten about that term. But I worry that there are a hell of a lot of people, whether it's clients or agencies or people within agencies, talking about digital like we know what the hell it means and talking about it like we're all referring to the same thing. That's the other dangerous thing, right? Yeah. When this term, for me, potentially is largely undefined, largely unquantifiable, and possibly more often than not lumped with hype and buzz. And that's a concern for me. So I worry about digital because I think the term itself is an unuseful and potentially distracting term in our environment. And I wanted to discuss that with you guys.
Thanks, Mark. It's really cool to discuss that with you.
Thanks,
So
Dan.
it's really fascinating to me. I mean, I think that obviously we're in this world that has lots of technology.
Are you scared to say digital now?
No, I'm frightened. But so we're in this digital world that has lots of technology that is evolving all the time, and things are changing, and it's completely frightening to people, especially marketers, who are really struggling to, in my mind, grapple with their, having operated from a traditional space and now moving into a far more digital or technologically advanced.
A different space,
a different space in a different world. And I think a lot of it, just at least in my experience, is that, as you say, digital is become an amorphous word to describe the channel that uses advanced technology, as opposed to being the sum total of understanding how people behave in the world today.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking more about an ethos or a movement than we are talking about a thing. Because it's easy when you go, this is an analog timepiece, this is a digital watch. Those are easy differentiations to make, right? Yeah. This is a cassette tape, that's analog, and look, I have a compact disc, that's digital. Those are easy differentiations to make. I want to kind of put a red flag up there, and I want to caution us because I don't think we can make the assumption that the term digital or that digital, whatever it is that we decide in 20 minutes is what is scaring clients. And I don't think it's just scaring clients. I think what is scary for all of us, for agencies, for clients, anybody, I guess, in this business landscape, is the rapid rate of change. On one hand is how quickly things have developed, and then the convergence that's happened on the back of that as well. So this is the interesting, when we talk about technology, that's a useful term for me, because technology, I can categorize that. And I think that's what's interesting is the developments in technology and how that technology enables what we do has converged our traditional ways of speaking of and thinking about what we do into one big mess. Because I guess if you develop a banner or design a banner and then you flight that banner on that digital billboard on the corner of Grayson and Rivonia, the one that flashes every night, and then like you think there's a cop and whatever, is that digital or is that outdoor?
Yeah.
You know, if you're reading a newspaper on your iPad and there's a print ad that comes up, is that mobile or is that print?
Sure.
We as agencies, I think, are quite flippin' nervous because we're like, well, all the things that we thought we could speak authoritatively about have been made benign or redundant by the fact that there's so much convergence, so much congruence in these channels.
Yeah, I mean, I think that convergence and the way that channels are evolving to incorporate different types of technology is really interesting. What's great about it is that it allows us to be very innovative and creative and try different things. What's hectic about it is, the sheer pace of change is something that we are not managing very well as agencies and as brands. So I always go back to the example of how teens use technology and how when teens use technology, it's an arbiter for how technology is going to change in the long term. But we don't have the research necessarily in this particular market to support the fact that teens are using Snapchat because it's so new, it's so evolving. The use of the technology, the upswing in how it just goes huge. But our systems, the way that the industry has systems is not matched to the space in which technology is evolving. And I think that for me, at least, I find it very fascinating how difficult it is to sell different types of technology to clients that allows them to broaden their horizons in terms of what digital can do for brands, because the systems and the structures and the industry itself is not geared towards assessing and understanding opportunities in the space. I don't know what your opinion would be, Esther.
So this conversation makes so much sense to me. Suddenly, it's like a light bulb came on, because we're not selling digital now. We're actually just selling human behavior. So it's not anymore about the fact that we're playing in a different space now. It actually is just how humans have evolved, and this is how we do things in our natural life. So for instance, social and using social platforms, when I use a social platform, I don't think to myself, oh, I'm flipping over to the digital portion of my life now and I'm going to use a social platform. It's a natural flow from continuing my social life, using technology or whatever. I don't know if I'm completely
so I think at a very, very high level, what we want to be able to do as agencies, if we want to affect human behavior, we want to convince people somehow to shift the way they think about something and perhaps to act on the back of that changing thought. How agencies have typically worked and typically categorized themselves and typically sold themselves is in a channel bias, right? So you were exactly. Print or television or radio specialist at that. I mean, that was very much it. And then there was kind of out of home was introduced, and then there was a little bit of convergence across those traditional channels. And now all of a sudden we had traditional and outdoor. And then all of a sudden you had the internet and screensavers. And that was very easy to bundle into that's a digital pillar.
Sure.
It was so easy to differentiate between those teams. So now you had traditional and then new media, whatever we called it at that stage. So now we've got just a smorgasbord of offerings across. And when we look at agencies that are winning today, and I'd be willing to put my hand on a block. See, I've got to avoid swearing in pretty much every idiom and expression I use. That the agencies that are succeeding today are not defining themselves by the channel that they reach consumers through or customers through, but rather by the way that they develop content in order to change behavior. That channel bias. And the agencies that are struggling are those that will still try and define themselves by a channel.
So I find that fascinating, especially because your agency is defined as the social authority.
Absolutely.
And social,
absolutely.
And social can be seen in certain respects as channel.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
As well as behavior. So can you unpack that for us? Why is social now not digital? Why is social not a channel? How does that work?
So I think it is. If we're talking about a channel, it would fall broadly under this very, very grey category of digital, and it would be one of the subsets of that. But I mean, that's the very reason why we have, I guess, in Cerebra, expanded across a whole bunch of offerings that fall outside of the realm of what we consider to be a traditional agency, because I think we've realized that social for us is far more a set of behaviors, far more a set of values, far more an ethos or a societal movement than it is a channel. And we know this because the biggest struggles that our clients face have got very little to do with how well or badly they write tweets, or how effective or ineffective their images are on Facebook, or how much spend they put into Instagram. Those are pretty irrelevant. The issue that they have is whether or not they can reconcile the promise that they make as an organization in these various channels with what they actually deliver as an organization. And if we evaluate why they're struggling as an organization, inevitably it comes down to an inability to adapt to change that's coming on the back of dramatic and transformative technological disruption, which we lump under a big banner, social. We call it social business as opposed to, I guess, social media. Because in my mind, if an organization can embrace the values and technologies of social internally, it makes it so much easier to reconcile what they promise externally.
I mean, I find it absolutely fascinating, and I totally get that, it's about bridging the gap between what you promise and what you deliver in the social environment. But I want to take a step back to the implications of that for traditional advertising and traditional marketing. Because I'm very interested to understand, Aqua is a digital agency that has now become quite an integrated agency, and we engage with a number of different above-the-line agencies and different types of agencies that are very specific in their channel bias, in the way that they approach things. And those agencies have incredible value and still add value to the world of marketing. But to what extent are their future prospects at risk if they are unable to see digital as more than just a channel?
So I think if at the risk of being dramatically oversimplifying in the way of thinking about this, but if you look at all of those agencies, regardless of where they position themselves and how they position themselves, what they're offering is content. And they're hoping to offer content that in some way, shape or form will change behavior. Whether they go, we're really good at content that traditionally lives on television, or we're really good at content that traditionally comes to life in an animation, or whatever it might be. This is about content. Where the threat is when we start creating content that excludes the possibility of living, breathing, and existing in other spaces. Content that is so exclusively suited to one particular environment that it can't, and I believe that's where content matters today. Content is great if we can create it once and use it many times. Content is great if it lives across multiple platforms and multiple audiences, when it has that kind of universal appeal, universal traction. And that's maybe what's missing at the moment, is that we don't always have that approach to our content. We're all trying to look after our piece of the pie. We get so precious about our fiefdoms that as long as we're creating something that makes sense for us in our channel right now, we feel like we've done our job. And I think we're doing the client a disservice if we think that way.
I mean, it absolutely makes sense that because of how humans behave, that, it's got to touch their life at every point, that content, in order for it to work. It can't just be channel specific or whatever, which leaves us as an agency at the point where our lives possibly can become limitless in terms of where we could go with content and what we can do with clients. One, there's the possible risk that we're not experts at the other areas, and two, also that maybe our clients aren't ready for us to touch on the other areas where they're happy using their existing experts.
Can we raise a contentious question?
Yeah.
Does expertise in a channel matter when you're creating great content?
Sure.
Doesn't great content work in any channel?
Well, it should. But the nuances of the platform are critical, because the way that those environments have created spaces that you need to understand in order to optimize the effectiveness of your content in those channels, correct?
Sure, but let's make it practical, right?
Yeah.
So whenever I think of iconic ads from my youth, there's a couple that pop up in my mind. One would be I don't know if you remember the Honda Ballard dinosaur ad.
I think so.
When the Honda Ballard launched, I think it was probably 1991. You guys were all not alive. But anyways, back then. But I remember it being quite a revolutionary ad, because they had, the Honda Ballard at that stage was a very, very progressive design for a family sedan, and they had this whole ad where it was driving past dinosaur skeletons, kind of symbolizing the other cars, the very boxy Cressida or the dolphin-shaped BMW, and it was kind of showing just how it was leaving them all behind. Another one would be the big pens and the clown and the circus. These are great images, great stories, great narratives that have remained because I had a larger attention span for a smaller amount of content at that stage. Maybe that's why they stayed. But if I imagine that kind of campaign brought to life today, there are a number of different ways to bring that single idea idea to life in any channel because it's a great story. It's a great idea. I don't think great ideas and great stories have lost any of their prevalence, have lost any of their gravitas. Executing on those great stories and ideas is critical, but that can be done in any way, shape, or form because all we're talking about is technical nuances. That's all we're talking about, right? And the more modern example would be our friend the Old Spice guy, right?
Yeah.
A piece of content, a story that could exist on any platform. That can exist on a billboard, that can exist in radio. You don't even have to see the guy to connect with that. And works ultimately in any channel. What do we do? Great story, great idea, great content, lives on any channel. Maybe we've lost an appreciation for just how important great stories and great ideas are. And again, this is what the agencies that we all covet and envy seem to have right. You know what I mean? It's not a deeper technical understanding.
Yes.
It's not, these guys have really mastered YouTube. It's that this is a group of people that inherently understand the story that needs to be told to reconcile what this brand promises with what they deliver.
Does it mean then that partnering becomes really, really important in order for you to tell that story? So are we not as in our agency silos, and I know that's definitely happening in terms of the agencies that we're bringing together here, part of our Wonderman group in South Africa. We're all starting to use each other's skills and work together. But does it mean that partnership becomes really important for you to be able to tell that story for the client throughout?
I think it might even be more revolutionary or disruptive than that, and I'm going to be careful what I say here because maybe somebody will quote me on it later when it fails, but I'm starting to think about an agency architecture or environment or whatever word you want to use that has at the center remarkable ideation, efficient, scaled down client service where, literally as efficient as humanly possible, a strategic element that brings that great idea into practicality, and then delivery units, whether it be data, content. We're talking about production. I mean, if we narrow content down to its simplest components, we're talking about writing, design, videography. But we make it more complicated than that. And then we're going, okay, what are the other pieces? Maybe media. But that's an agency. But in order to pull that off, you have to be a little bit more deliberate about collaboration. You have to care a little bit less about who gets the credit. You got to care a little bit more about what's more important for the client than for you. Those are the kind of dynamics. But again, when we look at agencies that are winning, when we look at agencies that are changing the way that clients see value, these seem to be common denominators. They're not calling themselves digital, I can guarantee that.
So Mike, I don't think we've given you sufficient space to rant in the show because I'd like to know why else you don't like the term digital.
So I don't like the term digital because it's too easy to tack onto. It's too easy to call yourself a digital guru. Was that a good enough vomit sound? I've been practicing that one in the car on the way here. It's too easy to take that amorphous term and attach it to something else, digital agency, digital expert, digital course, digital program, digital content, without actually having rigor attached to that. I can't go Mike Stopforth neurosurgeon like that because there is rigor attached to that title that I'm just not allowed to borrow. So because it's so big and because it's so grand, because it's so wobbly, there is a great danger of snake oil proficiency in the space. And I do worry a lot about that because what that does is it brings the entire value of the offering down.
I think it's really important because I grapple with that all the time because, I introduced myself as a digital strategist, but I'm a strategist. Yes. You know what I mean? Digital doesn't define the work that I do because in order to be a good digital strategist, you need to understand communication, you need to understand brand, you need to understand channel, you need to understand media. You need to understand.
Well, the only reason we'd call you a digital strategist is because somewhere along the line we were trying to reinforce our positioning as a digital agency, which means that we have to tack digital. We have to make people digital writers, as if there's a difference. We have
digital
to make
designer.
Whatever, my digital designer. Look. Again, there are technicalities. Before my guys are going to phone me up after and say, I understand what we do. But I think it's really important to acknowledge that sometimes we use that word irresponsibly. I'm gonna stick my neck out and go, the majority of times we use that word irresponsibly. And that's my concern. That's what gets me nervous. That's what gets me upset. You can then expand that to mobile or social, whatever it must be. And I think The rate of change is one of the issues, because as soon as we think we know what it is, it's not. The amount of time and energy that's being put into asking tough questions as opposed to doing the work is a luxury ill afforded to most practitioners in the space, right? But that's what needs to happen. We need to have these really tough debates about it. We need to have these really, and I look to one of the big signposts about how threatening a dynamic this is how little industry standards or regulation, or we have literally one industry body here in South Africa, and that's pretty much it from a regulation perspective or a standards perspective. And even that body, I think, has got a long way to go in terms of enforcing standards, and any other industry that charges the amount of money that we do is subject to that kind of scrutiny. And that's a concern for me. That's why I hate the word digital.
So, Mike, I think it's been a really awesome conversation. If there was one thing you'd like to take out of this for Aqua, Cerebra, and the broader Wonderman network, what would that be?
So I think, I get really, really excited about this network and our global positioning, because we're not talking like this. We're not talking about a channel bias. We're talking about fundamentally effective, creative solutions that are based on data and insights, which is universally applicable to any channel whatsoever, right? We're going, you have a problem, we're really smart, we can take the data that we gather from the hordes of information that you've made available to us, we can take really great perspective, we can take really great creative thinking, and we can smash those things together, collide them together, is that our word? Collision, right? And we can provide you with real, meaningful, measurable business solutions. And that is the only way that people like us, like our business, like our network, are going to continue to compete. When we see, and I think this is a dynamic that is a big wake-up call for us, traditional business solutions providers, in inverted commas, like a Deloitte or an Accenture or whatever it is, now labeling offerings as digital, because they know that's the easiest way to start infiltrating that market. Not really changing a hell of a lot of what they do, just labeling it in a way that allows them to. I think it's a mistake, but it's a big signpost for us. It's a big red flag. So what do we need? We need to think more like that. I think we need to care a little bit less about who gets the credit and more about how effective the work is. I think we need to look for more and more collaborative opportunities across constituent businesses in these networks, and I see really great alignment happening in this network at the moment, which is very encouraging.
So, Mark, if anyone out there listening would like to have more conversation with you on the death of buzzwords like digital and the start of new buzzwords like collision, where would they...
It's an internal buzzword. We're allowed all the internal buzzwords in the world.
Where would they be able to get hold of you?
It's easiest to contact me on Twitter at Mike Stopforth, or on LinkedIn for that matter. Otherwise, mail me at mike@cerebra.co.za, or any number of other things. Also, write a blog or author a blog called Mike Stopforth. It's not called anything. It's at mikestopforth.com, and there's some thoughts on this topic. I write a lot about my discomfort with our industry on that platform. So yeah, that'd be great.
Thanks, Mike, and thank you for listening to the Brave Ideas podcast. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. And while you're there, give us a rating and a review.
For more awesome content, visit the Brave Ideas blog, which you can find at aquaonline.com/Brave Ideas podcast. Also, if you want to get involved in the conversation, and I'm sure you do, especially with this episode, please follow at Aqua Brave Ideas on Twitter or Brave Ideas Podcast on Instagram.
If you want to keep in touch with me, Dan, you can follow me at elhermo on Twitter and elhermo23 on Snapchat and Instagram. And you can follow Esther.
My email address is estherm@aquaonline.com.
Special thank you to Mike Stopforth, our guest. Thanks to Matt Klevansky for engineering and production, and thanks to Matt and Isaac Klevansky for the music. Thanks to Johan Buerter for the art direction, and to our distribution team, Magesh Ramsamy, Kirsten Wiggle, Sabelo Kanyide, Simone Vichers, and Helen Semenis.
That brings us to the end of the show. We'll leave you with one final thought. There are no original ideas, only original people.